Welcome to this video on the Product Analytics and Execution Product Manager interview. My name is Anthony Saltrelli, and I'm the founder of Product Career List. So most people seeking product manager roles struggle to land job offers in today's oversaturated market. And one of the big reasons that they struggle is their performance in this interview, the Product Analytics and Execution interview. It typically happens in the final rounds. This interview, amongst other reasons, is why I made Product Career List. My goal is to provide strategies and frameworks to help candidates secure more interviews and ace them every single time, leading to offers from top tech companies. So the product analytics interview, which is sometimes called the product execution interview, is really testing your analytical abilities. From this interview, they're trying to figure out your skill level when it comes to data broadly. They want to understand if you know how to track data and come up with metrics. They're interested in seeing if you can leverage data in decision making. They're doing gut checks to make sure that you can come up with reasonable targets for features that you're launching. They want to make sure that when you do come up with metrics, that they tie back to the actual goal of the product or solution. So what types of questions are they going to ask in these product manager interviews? Well, there are really two different types that you might come across. So number one is identifying KPIs for a product surface area or feature. They may ask this in the form of, how would you measure success for XYZ product or feature? Or what data points would you measure for XYZ feature and why? Number two is performing root cause analyses where those metrics that have been defined are either going up or down. And they may ask you something like, the conversion rate of XYZ feature is down 20% this week. What happened? Or the volume of XYZ feature is down by 1,000 per month. What would you do if you were the PM of that feature? They may ask you to do this for their company or literally any other product out there, so you should be prepared for anything. Before we get into the frameworks I recommend for these two types of interview questions, I wanted to first cover what would make a strong response in these types of interviews. Number one would generally be around data literacy. They're grading you on how you talk about data, how fluent you are with explaining different concepts like how you'd actually track the data or edge cases that might exist with the data. Number two is around metric definition. They are grading you on your ability to define KPIs, which is short for key performance indicators. The KPIs should make sense and perfectly measure success for the feature that you're discussing. Number three is around communication. They're looking at your ability to very clearly communicate your reasoning for choosing metrics, discussing flaws in them, stuff like that. Number four is around prioritization. While you technically can create metrics for literally every single thing that happens in your product, you probably don't want to because that would just create a lot of noise for your product team. It's oftentimes best to have one or a couple of primary metrics to track for a feature launch. The interviewers are looking for your ability to prioritize and identify the most important metrics to measure instead of just trying to measure everything and anything. By the way, if you aren't familiar with the software that I'm using in this video, it's called Miro. Miro is basically an AI-powered innovation workspace that helps product teams collaborate. It's super flexible, so while I'm using it here to explain this interview type, it can also be used to help you and your team throughout the entire product development process, from discovery all the way to delivery. If you watched my day in the life of a product manager video, you know how critical these phases are to the overall product development process. PMs are really the ones leading their team throughout these phases every single day. And so having Miro as your sidekick platform while you do this is a superpower. Its intelligent canvas has interactive tools that make it literally so easy and fun for you and your team to get work done. Miro is definitely a tool that you're going to want to learn and use as you continue in your product management journey. If you want to check out more of the features that they recently launched in their Canvas 24 event, definitely check out the link in the description below. There's a great video there that explains all the different features that they launched and how you can use them. Okay, on to the frameworks. So the first question type is around identifying KPIs or metrics. I recommend you follow this 8-step approach in your answer. Following this framework allows you to answer questions in a very structured manner, covering a variety of different angles. And so while 8 steps might seem intimidating at first, it's definitely achievable with practice. So number one is questions. you're always going to want to start off asking the interviewer clarifying questions to more deeply understand the problem and product. This part gives you crucial info that you can then leverage and reference later on in the interview. Number 2 is talking about the company and product context. While this might feel a little bit awkward, I always like to start off my answer by chatting about the company, the product you're evaluating, their history, and stuff like that. You can mention why the product was created in the first place, what their goal is or what the problem they're solving is, who their competitors are, stuff like that. This part of your answer should be pretty short, but it'll impress your interviewer and show that you can really take a step back to understand the overall context that you're operating in. Number 3 is user segments. In this section, you're going to define what segments exist in their user base. In other words, who are their users? Breaking down user groups is not only important because the way you measure success might be different for different user types, but it also shows that users are top of mind for you. PM should always be thinking about the end user no matter what. So including this section in your response will convey that you're a strong product manager who always keeps users front of mind. Number 4 would be walking through the user's journey. You'll want to basically outline what is the user doing before they use the product or feature, kind of what triggered them to use it, how they're using it while they're inside the product, and then what happens at the end or after. Before this section, it is totally reasonable to pause for 30 to 60 seconds to brainstorm this user journey before you present it out. Okay, next up is number 5, the goal. This is where you clearly articulate the goal of the feature or product you're evaluating. So what does success look like? How do we know we are really solving the user's problem, whatever that problem might be? Next is number 6, doing a metrics brainstorm. This is arguably the most critical part of your interview answer. This is really where you show whether you have data fluency or not. Depending on the question, you're going to likely want to brainstorm 3 to 5 metrics. These metrics should be designed to measure the goal that you just stated. Be flexible here though, and always make sure that you're answering the interview's question and not just following this exact framework to a T in a very rigid way. Number 7 is prioritizing the metrics that you just came up with. So since you brainstormed 3 to 5 metrics in the previous step, it's an important time for you to decide which metric will be best to measure success. And every metric is different. They have strengths and they have weaknesses. You'll want to pick the metric that makes the most sense, or in other words, has lots of pros and not a lot of cons. Make sure you are always prioritizing down the right number of metrics based on the question. For example, if the interviewer asks, what is DoorDash's North Star metric? Or they could ask, what are 3 KPIs DoorDash should track? If they ask for 1 North Star metric, give them 1 North Star as your primary answer. But if they ask for 3, give them 3. One tip I have in this process is being very clear about the metric that you're presenting. So if you come up with 1 North Star metric, 2 supporting metrics, and 1 counter metric, you're going to want to clearly label those metrics as you say them. Remember, communication is a really important part of the analytics interview, and this is a section that people oftentimes trip up in. Okay, so we asked questions, we talked about the company, users, and goals. We then brainstorm metrics and prioritize the ones that we want to track. So we've basically finished answering the question, right? Well, yes, we have technically finished, but there is one last section I like to include to really add icing on the cake and impress my interviewers. And that is number 8, discussing the trade-offs and pitfalls with the metric you came up with. As I said, no metric is perfect. They have strengths and weaknesses. This is where you're going to want to address those weaknesses and really show how strong you are analytically. All right, now let's move on to the second type of analytics and execution interview that you may be asked, and that is the root cause analysis. In these questions, you're given a specific metric and you're told that there's been some type of change in it. It is your job to methodically investigate the change and then, depending on the interview question, address how you would fix it. In this type of problem, you're going to want to follow these steps. So number 1, ask clarifying questions so that you better understand the metric itself and what they're actually looking for. Next, you're going to basically want to go through this loop of investigating the issue by asking a variety of questions. You're going to be digging into the data and by asking them questions and breaking things down. After a while, you will eventually solve the mystery. You'll discover the root cause, and then you're going to want to propose next steps to address the problem if they ask for that. And finally, you're going to want to summarize everything, all your findings into one last summary. There's one framework that I usually follow in these types of interviews, and it's called TROPIC. That stands for time, region, other features, platform, industry, competition, and cannibalization. These are basically different angles that you can dig into to identify the issue. For time, you'd ask questions about when exactly this drop started, if it was a gradual decline or a sudden drop. The region would ask questions about where this drop was happening. Was it global or was it constrained to one geographical area? Stuff like that. I won't dive into every single part of TROPIC here, but you got the picture. So this is just one framework to investigate these root cause questions. You might need to get creative with how you approach this problem. And so this is where practice really comes in handy. You're going to want to practice out loud several times to get good at answering these types of questions. Since this is a short YouTube video, I wasn't able to dive into each step of this framework in a ton of detail for both the identifying KPI and root cause analysis questions. But if you'd really like to learn these frameworks at a deeper level and hear example responses to all these different questions, definitely check out Product Career List. I have over 18 hours of video content and 20 resources to help you prepare for this type of interview and others. You can start learning for free with the link in the description. Good luck in your analytics and execution product management interview. You got this.